From the 1011 Now streaming studio in Lincoln, Nebraska, this is the REPORT Husker Show.
Hello and welcome everyone to the 1011 Now streaming studio. I am Bill Rentschler, joined by Chase Madison and producer extraordinaire Brett Baker, who I think, Brett, your microphone is picking up a lot of
scanners.
Yeah, it's picking up quite a bit there. Kind of threw me for a loop as we jumped on the air there. But sorry about that. So Bill Rentschler in the 1011 streaming studio, joined by Chase Madison and Brett Baker. You may notice or recognize Brett's tone from previous REPORT podcasts of old, or
the archived editions.
Yeah, the archived editions, or if you are a fan of Hot Ones, Brett is also a Hot Ones YouTube celebrity. So that's where you may recognize Brett Baker from. How are we doing today, gentlemen?
Good. Yeah, heard a lot of people talk today, and they prepare for Wisconsin.
And it will be a trip up to Madison, one that Huskers over the past decade have not enjoyed, Brett. I know you've been up there several times, and it's something that we've never walked away from with a win, and that's what we got to do this week to try and get bowl eligible one more time. Brett, we haven't had you on the show yet this year. What have you kind of seen from your perch there? And I forget what stadium you're in, but you're at every game.
Yep, I sit up in the 600 in the East section, but not much different than what everybody else is seeing. A team that sometimes has it together, mostly on defense. Flashes of what could be, but not a lot of consistency on offense. And then, of course, just different faces, different names, different numbers in that offensive lineup for pretty much since the beginning of the season. It's kind of unreal, the injury rate these guys have had to experience this year.
Yeah, and the turnover rate that they've had to experience this year as well. I have it pulled up here, Chase. I went and I crunched the numbers, turnover margin by year dating back to the 2000 season, and there's only been 5 occurrences where the Huskers have had a positive turnover margin. And they currently are dead last with a minus 14 turnover margin this season.
There's only been 5 years or so?
5 seasons. And I mean, the last one, you got to go back to 2016, 2017 under Mike Riley. They were plus 5.
Yeah, that's not good. You want to be close to, you want to be in the positive or as close to 0 as possible. But this year, yeah, it's hurting the team more than I think in years past, just because you're leading the nation in turnovers, and I think it's less about the defense forcing turnovers and the turnover margin, because the defense is playing well regardless of them forcing turnovers, right? And so you look at this as like the black shirts are playing well and limiting points, and yes, it's nice to get turnovers, but the offense, kind of self-inflicted wounds, I think is a bigger impact necessarily than maybe what the turnover margin is as a whole. Like, looking at the statistics, sure, but the defense is playing well regardless of forcing turnovers or not.
And Brett, if you again look at this list that I have, you'll remember this. As bad as this year have been, and I remember it, you go back to 2003, a Bo Pelini led defense. They had a plus 23 turnover margin and were ranked first in the country in turnover margin. So this year is as bad as it gets. That year was as good as it could get.
Yeah, that year one of the Bullock brothers, I think, had like 9 or 10 interceptions, was among the nation's best. And yeah, it just seemed like every game those guys were flying to the ball and making a big difference for an offense really that they could use all the help it could get. That 2003 lineup was not one of the more powerful ones. But yeah, those guys definitely were a difference maker, and we have not seen anything like that since.
They had 47 takeaways that season.
Wow.
15 fumbles recovered and 32 interceptions, which is wild.
Which is like 2 or 3 a game. You don't really see that nowadays.
No, you don't. And I feel like you throw the ball more nowadays than you did back in in the early 2000s.
Teams have gotten better at throwing the ball as well.
Yes.
So that's definitely a factor. And
All
in
right.
the Big Ten, some of these teams and offensive they've seen, obviously Colorado liked to air it out. Michigan had success. But, a lot of these teams are, still sticking to the run game, even though the Huskers' run defense has been one of the best in the country. And Maryland just squeaked over 100 yards. I know they had a streak of keeping teams under 100 yards rushing. But it's going to be interesting to see what Wisconsin does against this defense and how much they decide to run the ball over pass the ball. Tanner Mordecai is in his 7th year of college football, 6th year, I believe.
Yes.
But Braylon Allen, I'm not sure if he's healthy or not. I believe he missed their game against Northwestern. He's a difference maker on the ground. But yeah, it's an interesting Wisconsin team. So
it looks like they were led by not Braylon Allen against Northwestern, so I don't know if Braylon Allen played, but Brett, again, it's Saturday night, 6:30 in Madison, Wisconsin. The opening line was Wisconsin -7. That's moved to Wisconsin -5. Over under of 36.5. Again, Wisconsin on the year now, like Nebraska, scuffling under a first-year head coach. Maybe not like Nebraska, but 5-5, 3-4 record overall in the Big Ten Conference, the exact same as Nebraska. I guess I don't know. It's obviously the same record, but I feel like Wisconsin's record is more disappointing to Wisconsin fans than maybe not necessarily a 5-5 record for Nebraska, if that makes sense.
Sure, and hammer that under, by the way. Yeah, I mean they've had a lot more success in the last, well, certainly during the time of the Nebraska's, joining the Big Ten. They've always been up in the upper echelon of the West Division, and they've been well represented in the Big Ten title game and in various bowl games. So, yeah, this is a different kind of feeling for them. So they have not had to endure this for a long time. So I'm sure they'll still be fired up. They'll be looking for that, to keep that streak alive against Nebraska in Camp Randall.
I have been told, though, Saturday is the first day of deer hunting season in Wisconsin. So if that may impact the crowd at all, I'm not sure, Chase.
There was also photos going around against Northwestern that Camp Randall, it wasn't jumping as it can be. Now, granted, I think it's a night game, or given that it's a night game, I think that there will be added stakes. I think this fan base, I don't know if they're entirely sold on Luke Fickell. I don't know if it's entirely a collective, as much as at the beginning of the season, Nebraska fans drinking the Rule-Aid. I don't know if the Luke Fickell water up in Madison was as popular. Mm-hmm. And against Northwestern, there were some photos online that didn't look like the greatest crowd. However, it still jumped around. Actually, at the Hawks training facility today, they weren't trying to keep it from us. The media, we were there when we were supposed to be there. We could hear them blasting crowd noise and jump around in the Hawks training facility. So they're definitely preparing for an intense environment. And some of the players and even coaches talked about how iconic this place is, but also how the Huskers really have never won.
Mm-hmm. Signs going up all over the locker room, apparently, Brett, advertising the fact that Nebraska hasn't beat Wisconsin since 2012.
And they haven't beat Wisconsin since they added the Freedom Trophy in 2014. Some of the players are trying to figure out, what is this trophy? Well, the reason they don't know what it is because they haven't never had it. So, there's a little bit more, I think, edge to this game than just a team coming away with a bowl win. Because I think, the Huskers, at least with the papers in the locker room and the signage across the facility and pumping the noise in, I think what Matt Rule and what this staff is trying to do is pivot this from beating the Badgers for a bowl game to beating Wisconsin because they don't like Wisconsin and they haven't won here in the past. Righting the wrong of the past history of the last 9 games going in Wisconsin's favor. And so Matt Rule doesn't always like to look at the past because he usually says, like, well, I wasn't here. That doesn't matter. But I think he's doing it this week to maybe pivot the pressure of needing a 6-win. He's more saying, let's go beat Wisconsin because we haven't beat Wisconsin. And I think that might be a smart mentality because the looming cloud over this program the last 3 weeks, since they got their 5th win against Purdue, has been getting 6 win.
I like that take, Brett. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's and it's never been like beating by one kind or another. There's been several different ways the Huskers have taken an L in Madison. They've had close, overtime, almost wins. They had the was it Gordon who ran for 400 and some odd yards.
You had to bring that up.
Yep, 3 quarters of action. The Russell Wilson blowout in 2011, our first road game, Nebraska's first road game in the Big Ten. So there hasn't been a consistent theme other than walking out of there with an L. So I do think it's smart just to let's right the wrong. Like Chase said, I think that's like something that this squad can put their stamp on. That hey, nobody else has done this yet. We can be the ones to do it, and I do think they can do it. I just think they have to hold on to the ball.
And they started the season 5-2, but they've lost 3 straight. Again, Ohio State, Indiana, and Northwestern, which, again, you can understand losing to Ohio State. Everyone's done it. But Indiana and Northwestern are certainly 2 programs that Wisconsin in a normal year would just kind of bully around the yard. But now that they've tried to transition to this more air raid offense, they still have a good running back in Braylon Allen. But I guess what was your initial reaction with the hire of Luke Fickell and his wanting to move towards this air raid offense?
Well, a lot of people wanted, is it Jim Leonard, is that correct?
Yes.
The defensive coordinator to just slide into that role. And I even have a buddy who's from Wisconsin that was like, it just made sense. But, Luke Fickell was one of those big names out there, had success bringing Cincinnati all the way to the college football playoff. And I think he's just maybe not necessarily a traditional Big Ten coach coming into a Big Ten program.
But he seems like he should be. He coached at Ohio State.
Yeah, but I'm what he was running at Cincinnati.
Yeah, that's
you know
true.
what I mean? Doesn't really translate to the Big Ten exactly. I think he is a Big Ten guy, but maybe some of his ways and practices. I don't know. I think, Wisconsin will have more success just ground and pound and playing their style of football. And they can very easily do that against Nebraska because Nebraska is not going to go out there and throw 300 yards on you, right? They're not going to go throw the ball. So
it would be a Christmas miracle a month before Christmas.
Yeah. Well, and so I think it's interesting because, losing against Ohio State makes sense. Indiana, whatever. But then to Wisconsin to not even really be in that game against Northwestern last week. Ben Bryant came back from injury, who the Huskers did not have to face at quarterback, and Ben Bryant can throw the ball around, and they had success against the Badger defense that just had holes in the secondary. So this is an interesting skid for Luke Fickell in year one, and definitely putting a sour taste in fans' mouths who aren't used to. Like, Nebraska's been in this position the past,
10 years.
10 years, right? Since 2016, they haven't felt confident in making a bowl, and they haven't made a bowl. So Wisconsin has just been like, they're already bowl bound at this point in the season. So I think Wisconsin's in a little bit more of uncharted territory than Nebraska is from a familiarity standpoint.
And coincidentally, Brett, Nebraska is actually 1-0 against Luke Fickell.
That is true. First year, he came here headlining the Ohio State squad with the illustrious Joe Bowserman.
Oh, that was...
remember that passing chart of Joe Bowserman?
It was not good.
It was like 3 balls inside the field and then 27 balls in different parts of the stadium.
I remember Levante David strip tackling Braxton Miller, and it was Stanley Jean-Baptiste with the pick of Bowserman, I think, towards the end of the game.
Yeah.
So...
And Rex Burkheads.
Oh yes, Rex and Taylor Martinez, and back in the glory days. So,
It's like,
but the one big question for Nebraska, Brett, is who's going to take the snaps at quarterback. We heard from Rule yesterday, Marcus Satterfield today. They're going to get all the guys reps, but Heinrich has an ankle issue now. Chuba has a groin issue that apparently he was supposed to have surgery on. And you have Jeff Sims, who turns the ball over every other drive. So who are you lining up behind center?
Who's the 4th-string guy?
Luke Longball.
Jack Wokey or
Luke Longball.
And then Luke Longville. Both those quarterbacks shouldn't play.
How about Tommy Hill? Tommy Hill can do everything. Let's put him in quarterback.
He would at least make things pretty exciting.
Yeah, obviously I think you got to go with the guy who's most healthy and ready.
But what if that guy is Jeff Sims?
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think fans probably don't necessarily want to see Jeff Sims lead the offense out there. The one thing I will say about Jeff Sims is that he did make some bad throws, and I think the second interception was one of his worst throws of the year. But the first interception, there was an argument for pass interference and illegal contact in the ball, and then the safety comes over, makes a great play, and an overthrown ball because of the contact in the back of the end zone. But before that, Sims was leading the offense down the field with pretty good success. So I think Sims definitely will still make this game interesting. My opinion is that of the 3 quarterbacks, because we really got a sampler, we got the appetizer platter where you get a little bit of everything last weekend. We got to see all 3 quarterbacks play. Obviously, if Chuba is healthy enough, I think you go with Chuba. I think besides that one play where the receivers didn't really execute the play correctly, and the ball should have been at that corner of the end zone. It should have been either a great catch by Billy Kemp or no one catches it and they kick a field goal on that 3rd and goal. Besides that one play, I think Chuba looked the best of the 3 quarterbacks leading the offense.
I don't think he's wrong, Brett.
Yeah, I mean, it's all different shades of whatever it's been. But yeah, I mean, if he's the healthiest, it doesn't hurt to put someone new in there and see what he can do. He's waited his turn. One thing I will say about Jeff Sims, and I don't think this gets talked about enough, is he's been a stand-up guy since he came back from injury. You never hear him saying, hey, it should have been my job back. I was the starter. You don't lose it to injury. He's always supportive, and he's always team-oriented on the sidelines. So I want to say that, I know Jeff takes some knocks, but he is a stand-up guy, and none of this can be easy for him. So I want to say I've been impressed with how he's handled this, and obviously he has not played football the way he would probably like to play football either. But I think he's been a stand-up guy, and that, for as rocky as it's been, it has to have helped things, at least keep things on the track.
And yeah, and I say you can't play Jeff Sims not to be mean or hard on the guy, but if the coaches say they got to look at what's on the tape. Well, what's on the tape for Jeff Sims is turnover after turnover after turnover, and sometimes it is maybe a bad there should have been a pass interference call or something like that, but
well, the one thing I'll say, and Brett, I agree with you. Jeff Sims is he's played the role as a leader and a single digit and a captain. To almost better than anybody this year, especially what he's had to go through. The one thing I will say about, has Jeff Sims looked very bad at times playing the game, not as a person or a leader. We know he's great in those departments. Yes, he's looked very bad. The one thing I will say is that of the quarterbacks, it's Heinrich Harburg that has the most turnovers now.
That's true.
Of the Huskers. They have 27 turnovers lost, which leads the nation, and 22 of them are by Nebraska quarterbacks. I broke this down yesterday because in the game notes, Nebraska's not going to flaunt those stats. You have to go in and kind of do your own math.
Yeah.
Heinrich Harburg has 11 of them. He has 7 interceptions and 4 fumbles. And I believe all of those fumbles are running, like himself.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Maybe one is a handoff altercation. I know Sims has 1 or 2 where it's a handoff thing where he gets the fumble, but it was kind of half on the running back.
Yeah.
So Harburg has 7 picks, 4 fumbles. Sims has 6 picks, 4 fumbles. And Purdy has the 1 interception. Purdy obviously has the most limited time, so you really can't count him in those. And then the other 5 turnovers are all fumbles. 2 by Anthony Grant, 1 by Emmett Johnson, 1 by Gabe Irvin Jr., who's done for the year, and then 1 by Snodgrass on a kickoff.
On the kickoff.
Snodgrass,
Yes.
Against Purdue, I believe that was.
But so the one thing I will say with that point of breaking down those turnovers is if Sims is healthy, and I know Sims has taken a lot of, looked, I guess, worse at times because he's played less than Harburg. Mm-hmm. Harburg also has had an issue turning the ball over and throwing the ball. 7 interceptions, and, the one to Fedoni, he gets pressured and overthrows him, and that's intercepted. But he also had one earlier that got called back in the first quarter due to a penalty. So, Chuba obviously has the least amount of sample size, so we don't really know. But, if you're going to make the argument against Sims because of the turnovers and those issues, Heinrich Harburg is
right there in that discussion.
Also can be made the same case. So I think, just to kind of wrap this point up, in Wisconsin on Saturday night, while I like what I've seen from Chuba, if the healthiest quarterback is Jeff Sims, he probably should be the one leading the offense out there because, if Heinrich can't run, if Chuba takes one hit and then is done, you'd rather have the guy that's most healthy. But if Chuba is close to 90 or 100%, then you have a conversation there.
Talk about stats that they don't flaunt around. When was the last time Nebraska had a game where 3 different quarterbacks threw an interception?
Ooh.
The first game that came to my mind was the 2004 game at Texas Tech, where Nebraska threw 5 picks. But I looked in the box score, and it was the illustrious Bo Davis that threw 4 of the 5. Joe Daly had the other. But yeah, it could have been a history-making game in the worst kind of way for Nebraska offense. Just what are the odds of 3 different quarterbacks coming in and throwing 3 picks?
Well, I would just like to know how many games the Huskers have had to play 3 quarterbacks, and not there was a quarter Mike Stuntz, he lined up at wide receiver, had to line up under center 3 different quarterbacks due to injury or otherwise.
When I was a young man growing up, and this is back in the heydays of the 80s and 90s, it was routine to see Nebraska starter go into the third quarter, and then the second stringer would get some third quarter into the fourth quarter. The third stringer would get some mop up in the fourth quarter.
But that's because they were winning 70-10.
That's right. Well, let's get back to that.
Yes, that would be nice.
Yeah, the positive of playing 3 quarterbacks.
Yes.
Well, that game with 5 interceptions you mentioned, I was about 3 or 4 years old, so it doesn't really off the top of my head. But I think it just shows against Maryland that the defense kept them in the game so much that playing 3 quarterbacks was just to try to get this offense working. And Satterfield said today that they're clawing and scratching to get this offense moving and rolling, and he has confidence. And Rule said it yesterday, which I thought was some of the most notable sound we ran in our newscast last night, was Rule said people criticism's fine. He's okay. The fans, he can take it, and Satterfield can hear it too. Mm-hmm. But he said was that people want to get up on their soapbox, and they want their head coach to go and make instant changes to the assistant staff of the program. And he kind of called out Nebraska. He said, going in and firing everybody, where has that worked? When did that work here? That's what he said. And during the Frost era, that was something that had to happen because of leadership of the AD and the not success in the program, and that was kind of to keep his job. But Rule says that's not going to happen. He's going to stick with his guys, at least for now. I would make the prediction that I wouldn't be too surprised if potentially a quarterback coach comes in the offseason because Satterfield's doing both duties. But it's good to see Matt Rule defend his coaches and have confidence. And for Marcus Satterfield, yes, the offense isn't clicking, but the quarterback play also hasn't been consistent or great throughout the season.
That's been Brett.
The guy's lost umpteen linemen. He's lost umpteen running backs. It's not like you're running out with your A-list,
You have
first-team
freshman
guys,
receivers
first day
playing.
of fall camp.
Yeah.
Yeah. So part of that is I definitely do not hold Satterfield accountable for all of that.
Well, and it's just nice, Brett, especially after watching the last decade. Like, Rule is the adult in charge of the room. Like, I'm sure these Monday press conferences would sound a whole lot different if Scott Frost was still here and this turnover issue was still going on. But Rule, again, to a fault, takes blame for everything.
Yeah.
Well, the buck stops here. I mean, that's the classic saying, right? And it does, and he knows that, and he's mature enough and adult enough, as you say, to adhere to that, which we have not had a lot of. So, yeah, I was glad to hear it yesterday.
All right. Anything else from football? We could probably sit and talk about turnovers for a good long time.
Yeah, I think we've kind of we've gone around the block about the turnovers, the quarterback, and them focusing on beating Wisconsin, not just making a bowl. And so a lot of good points from today. It's presser, a lot of good things from Rule yesterday. He's very honest. He's very transparent. And, I think, this team is just going to try to go 1-0. I'm not going to sound like a player here, but, confidence against Wisconsin. We'll see what happens Saturday. There's a lot of questions still unanswered, and I think it will come down to a game time on the quarterback. So.
And Kevin's not here, but I will do his usual plug. TV and broadcasters, play-by-play. This will be on NBC, too, by the way. Televised, not Peacock.
Yep,
NBC.
Noah Eagle.
Noah Eagle on the play-by-play.
Who is the younger son of Ian Eagle.
And Todd Blackledge is the analyst, and Catherine Tappan on the sidelines. I do enjoy Todd Blackledge, so...
Yeah, I think fans will just instantly get a better viewing experience because they can just turn on our sister station, at least in our viewing area, KSNB, on NBC, and not have to pay a subscription.
Yeah, that Peacock broadcast.
Quick anecdote on Blackledge.
Yes.
So every year when I was still in San Antonio, the Alamo Bowl would have a kickoff pigskin preview luncheon at the beginning of the season. They'd bring in an ESPN personality. Blackledge was the guy one year, and so I was interviewing him, and I mentioned the 1982 Nebraska game to him, and he goes, I take my kid to the College World Series every year, and not a year goes by that I'm not in Omaha. And somebody yells out, "Hey, Blackledge, he was out of bounds." This is now we're working on more than 40 years ago. So I love, A, he has a sense of humor about it, and B, you got to love Huskers never forget.
No, we don't. We are like elephants. We do not forget. Yeah, and that Peacock broadcast I thought was not great. I felt like my phone brightness was all the way down, and I kept wanting to turn the brightness up, and it wouldn't work. So
I don't know if it was the sky, but
I mean, it might have been a little bit.
It did seem dark. It was weird. It seemed overcast. That's true.
Yeah. So, all right, volleyball continues to be the bright spot of our lives when it comes to sports.
Hey, soccer too.
Hey, they're on my list. We're going to talk about soccer. Don't worry.
I'm just all right.
Yeah, volleyball.
I love the beautiful game.
It was volleyball 2-0 last week. Beats Northwestern 3-1. Illinois 3-1. Andy Jackson, your co-freshman of the week in the Big Ten, still number one in the AVCA poll, collecting all 64 first place votes. Only 4 matches left, and I didn't realize, but their last home match of the season is this week. It's Friday against Michigan. And then they're on
Laney Choboy, number one SportsCenter top 10 plays of the day.
That was
their dive into the stands.
An insane play into the stands. Were you there on Sunday at all?
I was not, but I saw it on ESPN, and credit to her for beating out all the other plays. It was a heck of an effort.
Absolutely, it was. So Michigan at home, 8 p.m. BTN. Michigan again. There's no nights off in the Big Ten, but this week you'd have to think it'd be a pretty easy one for John Cook and the Huskers. Michigan is 7-18, 5-11 in the Big Ten, and then Sunday they're at Iowa. Iowa's 8-20, and they're 0-16 in the Big Ten. I'll say this for Iowa though,
and they've never beaten Nebraska.
I do really like their court, their home court. It's kind of gray, surrounded by black. So they at least have that going for them. But obviously I think the big news for Nebraska volleyball this week was the fact that Wisconsin loses to Penn State at Penn State. And so now they have a little bit of a cushion going into their last 4 matches of the Big Ten schedule. Yeah,
it's always good to hear, but you can't take your foot off the pedal. And John Cook commented that, kind of makes a testament to more appreciation of their effort in State College because they went 5 sets, and that was a crazy match that A ended up winning. So that definitely has crossed their mind on the Big Ten standings and regular season champion. But I think their focus right now is just to keep those top rankings to potentially be an NCAA top seed, and then be also hosting a regional, which if everything aligns, and right now they're the number 1 team, they would, assuming they continued to win, they would host all the matches until they got to the Final Four.
That would be a rowdy Bob Devaney and very ideal.
Unique about this Friday night's match, it's 8 p.m. I believe in the past they would schedule this match for later because they would do senior things before the match. There's not a senior on this team. John Cook said he thought they should honor the senior citizens at today's presser. I think they're doing something potentially to honor the fans. He said is in the works. We'll have to see on Friday night. But yeah, this is a young team that just keeps winning.
John Cook's always good for one interesting quote in one of his press conferences.
And it'll be another sisterly reunion
Yep.
at the Harper sisters, which is always a cool thing. I think it's awesome how Nebraska fans have always embraced, their players' sibling. I think it's just a very cool and classy thing that they do, and it's just another reason why you can't beat Nebraska volleyball in the Devaney Center.
Yeah, I was at the Huskers game against SMU very early in the season, where Allie Batenhorst's younger sister was playing for the Mustangs, and crowd erupts. It's it's very exciting. Even against Lipscomb, which one of their non-con games, just similar to SMU, it was a weekend of games. The crowd erupted for one of Lipscomb's players, who
From Nebraska.
from Lincoln, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, Lincoln East or Southwest, one of the two.
Yeah.
So
The fans do a great job of acknowledging their own and acknowledging, extended family.
So, Husker volleyball continues to roll. Really quickly on basketball, both men's and women's teams starting out the season 3-0. First time for Fred Hoiberg starting out 3-0. Big week for Amy Williams and the Lady
women?
Huskers. What?
The women's team's not 3-0. They're
I think they're
2-0.
3-0? 2-0? Oh, 2-0.
They play tonight, so we'll have to see if they become 3-0.
I was counting the Alcorn State game as a win prematurely.
Cart before the horse there.
But their big matchup this week is they host Creighton on Sunday at 1 o'clock, and that game is on BTN again. Always a good time to get all the J-Skers together in PBA. And the men have started 3-0. I do know that for a fact. Yes. And they have Stony Brook on Wednesday at 7 p.m. on BTN Plus. And then they, kind of unfortunate scheduling, have their Pentagon game in Sioux Falls on Saturday at 3 p.m. So Husker fans will have a busy Saturday.
Oregon State?
Oregon State, Oregon State. The Husker fans will have a busy Saturday with basketball in the afternoon and then football at 6:30. So
yeah, definitely a lighter start to the season for the basketball non-conference schedule. Oregon State will be a test for sure. And then, I think Amy Williams' crew, the women, I would project them to get it done tonight and beat Alcorn State. I know you just went out and said they're 3-0, but they're off to a good start as well. I think they actually had to battle more in Wyoming than they maybe initially thought in the first half.
the Pokes are tough.
Yeah, and this is a Nebraska team, women's team, that has already dealt with some injuries similar to the men's side of things, but losing Widener and then Maddie Kroll has been out. So this is some new faces on this Nebraska women's team that, but they still have Jazz Shelley. So,
And then Brett, not to leave you hanging here, rounding things out with soccer. The Huskers hosting the second and third round of the NCAA tournament. They beat South Dakota State last week, and now are set to face against Tennessee in the round of 32. They'll also host it's UC Irvine versus Gonzaga on Friday, and then obviously the winner of Nebraska-Tennessee will get the winner of that game in the Sweet 16.
Yep, second biggest crowd ever at Hibner for that South Dakota State game. I think probably the first was the night it opened. So that's awesome, though. The fans are tuned in and aware and know what's going on with that club because they have had a heck of a season, want to share the Big Ten title. Got a fortunate break in, and I don't know what team it was in the tournament that got knocked off, but allowed them to be able to host, these next couple of rounds. So John Walker's got it cooking over there. He's got some really, really sharp young players, which is an awesome story that's just kind of quietly been brewing all fall. But excited to see how far they can take it.
I think it was Xavier. Xavier had the 4 seed, and they lost to Tennessee. So that's what has allowed the Huskers to host the second and third round here. Nebraska being the 5 seed.
They'll host on Sunday regardless if they win Friday night or not. If they lose Friday, there'll be 2 teams playing. And tough thing for Husker fans is that if they win Friday, the game on Sunday will be the exact same time as the women's basketball game versus Creighton.
Yeah, 1 o'clock.
So, you have options what you want to do for Husker fandom. But yeah, this women's soccer team has been very good this season.
Real quick to go back to women's basketball, you said they'd had a good week. Landing Britt Price and Kennedy Williams, which is going to be another interesting story. Obviously, it's Coach Amy Williams' daughter, but also she's going to play softball for Ronda Revelle, basketball and softball, kind of like Maggie Mendelson doing the volleyball-basketball combo. I think that is an awesome model that more schools should adopt because you're going to get a better athlete, well-rounded athlete. And, if the kid wants to play both, what's the harm in saying, you knock out our season, then go crazy, on the softball diamond. What's the harm in that? I think it's a good a piece of recruiting, obviously, by both Coach Revelle, Williams, and Coach Cook, in Maggie Mendelson's case.
And you saw Coach Rule do that, too. I think Jalen Lloyd's also going to be on the track team along with playing football.
And you also have players commit for football and baseball a lot of times. So.
And, okay, to kind of round things out, I just wanted to check in with you. High school state football is coming up.
Don't have many teams left.
We don't have too many area teams left. Who do we have left?
Wahoo is playing in the C1 championship versus Boone Central. Boone Central is up in Albion, but that's still part of our viewing area. Don't be surprised. We have a pretty west and a wide viewing area. So Boone Central versus Wahoo should be a good game in the Class C1 championship. We have, is it EMF?
West.
Is that what it's called?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
EMF on Monday. In, I believe, the D2 championship. That's the first one of the day at Memorial Stadium at like 10:15 a.m.
When do those? What's the schedule on those? Do you know?
So I believe there's 3 games each day at Memorial Stadium. Class B is Monday night. Class A is Tuesday night. And then these games are broadcasted on
Nebraska Public Media.
And I believe it'd be like D2 and D1 Monday potentially, and then C2 and C1 Tuesday. Because Wahoo Boone Central play Tuesday. And then Monday night is Class B, which we almost had the Waverly Vikings make it, but they lost Omaha Skutt for I don't know, they've ran into each other a lot.
Yeah.
And so it's Skutt versus Bennington, I believe, in Class B, so those aren't local. And then Class A is Omaha West Side versus Elkhorn North.
We'll have to see who this year's Christian Alvano is, who shows out in a state championship game and gets a Husker offer.
Well, Westside has been beating people by so much they don't need field goals. And actually, Alvano was asked about it today. He was on the side podium for a few minutes, and he was saying that, like, on Fridays, sometimes they'd be traveling or whatnot, and he'll just turn on his phone and see, like, oh, they're up 50-10. Obviously he was their hero last year, but this is a West Side team that's even better this year without him. And hopefully these games are close, but a game like last year at Memorial Stadium was probably one of the most memorable Class A Nebraska State football finals in history.
Yeah. Absolutely was. All right, guys. Brett, anything else before we let everyone go?
Nope. Just let's hope the NCAA authorized stick 'em again. That's my poll. We get some stick 'em and keep the ball in the hands of the Huskers.
All right, Chase, what about you? Anything else before we let everyone go?
No, I'm good.
All right, appreciate everyone for tuning in. As always, again, keep it tuned at 10:11, both on air and online, for all the latest news, weather, and sports. And Chase will have you covered all week long, everything Husker-related and everything else sports-related. So thanks for tuning in, everyone. We'll see you next time.
You've been listening to the REPORT Husker Show from 1011. Watch, listen, and stream on the 1011 Now app, on YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more Husker coverage throughout the week, watch the REPORT on 1011 Sports at 6 and 10 p.m. and download the 1011 Now app.